those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Hey guys, welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I am Jake, your bartender, and I'm joined on center stool by Drew. And today, we're getting the big three, Drew. We're going to miss baseball, but I think we're going NFL first. We're going to talk NHL, NBA, in whatever order you want to. It's your world. We're all just living in it.
Oh, really?
Towards the back end of the show, but I think we're going to start with some NFL news, which, if you haven't heard, Seattle's losing some old veterans. I guess you can say it's a changing of the guard, and they're going to be moving on and bring in some other guys. Also, on top of that, Telvin Smith tells the Jaguars he's not going to play this year. Don't know what that means. Also, Xavien Howard, brand new contract out there in Miami. We're going to talk about that as well. But why don't we start with Doug Baldwin and Cam Chancellor, now currently no longer Seahawks.
Yeah, what's going on, man?
Is there a chance we see either one of these guys again?
I don't think on Cam. With his injury to his neck, I mean, he didn't even play last year. I mean, I think he's done. I think just all the wear and tear on his body, I think it's said,
Yeah. I mean, he had that bad, it was either a neck or a spine injury towards the end of his career. I think it was 2 years ago that he had it, and I didn't expect to see him. In fact, I thought he retired quietly, and we just hadn't heard anything about him.
I'm really surprised they kept him on the roster all year long. As far as Baldwin, I'd like to believe that he can. I mean, the rumors coming out first were saying, his career's over with. He's not going to be able to do anything. But, a lot of people have come back from horrific injuries. And, Doug Baldwin is just one of those players that wants to be a good player.
No, I agree.
And wants to play.
It's his body not holding up. How's it going, Andy? Good to see you, man. Yeah, I think with Doug Baldwin especially, and Cam Chancellor too, I think both of these guys are highly motivated guys. They're guys that seem like they love the game, quote unquote. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but they're guys that seem to want to be out there. It's just, especially with Doug Baldwin, I think his body has failed him more than some other guys in the NFL. He's great when he's out there, but when you're not available all the time, you can't afford to give up the roster spot if you're the Seahawks. I don't necessarily kind of blame them for making this move. I think they knew it was coming when you look at their draft strategy and then bringing on guys like DK Metcalf. It is a shame, though, especially when you talk about the kind of implications this guy could bring to the Seahawks. If he was healthy, and we're talking about them having Tyler Lockett as a number 2 or a number 3 guy, and then you have DK Metcalf on top of it, Russell Wilson could finally sit there and say, I've got some weapons, right?
Yeah, definitely. Sheree's saying Baldwin will be a Patriot, man. No, that doesn't really surprise anyone there. They're always picking up wide receivers that are or veteran wide receivers.
And they love guys in the slot.
That's definitely a Patriot thing.
Doug Baldwin operates really well in the slot as well. I would not be surprised to see him move there if he can find a way to get healthy. But again, I think that's the biggest challenge. I think there's probably 25 or 30 teams in the NFL that would like to have a guy like this. The question is going to be, is he going to be available for that to happen? And I'm pretty sure the Seahawks are confident it's not going to if they're willing to let him go. Because they could have just put him on the physically unable to perform list. He didn't count against your roster. As long as he stays on there, he didn't count against your cap. And they've been fine. But I think this was them kind of throwing their hands up and saying, it's probably not going to happen, Doug. Good luck to you. And, maybe you can land somewhere else.
Right. Steve, I'm glad you could join us, man. He's rooting for them Blues, man. He believes in the St. Louis Blues.
Hey, we called it, right? I didn't think it'd be as tight of a series, but we both called it. We said the Blues are going to move through. We're going to talk about them a little bit later, but again, when you're talking about the Sharks having played 2 Game 7s, 2 emotional Game 7s, 2 controversial Game 7s, I like where the Blues are at.
Sheree says, Tyler Lockett, my man crush. Yeah, he is.
He does love him. All because I said I didn't think he was that good one time, and now every time we talk about Tyler Lockett, it's like, hey, he caught a touchdown this week. Did you see that?
9 touchdowns.
I was like, who else is catching him, Drew?
That doesn't matter.
Exactly. Nobody.
He still led the NFL or tied with.
Why
the NFL.
wasn't Mike Davis out there catching him? I mean, that's the biggest other name in the Seattle offense.
Because he's not as good as Tyler Lockett is.
But let's move forward. Let's talk about Telvin Smith, because on Instagram he came out and said, if you don't know, Jacksonville linebacker here said, I'm just going to take this year off. It's for personal reasons, he says. I don't know if it's something mental health related. I don't know if it's something physically related, something going on with his family. But he's like, I'm just not going to play. Didn't bother talking to the Jaguars or anything beforehand, Drew. It seems like a pretty big issue to me. I mean, do you think there's something going on in the locker room, especially when you talk about Tom Coughlin and the way he was sitting there saying, oh, these guys don't have heart. These guys don't have the drive that other teams have had that you need to win the Super Bowl. Do you think that's kind of a big issue here?
I do think it's probably a leading factor for him saying this. I do think something was probably going on, regardless if it's mental health or problems with his family or whatever. I'm sure those comments upset him. I'm sure they did, because if you're sitting there battling with something, the next thing you hear is your workplace is going, he just doesn't want to be here. When they don't know, I would feel a little upset. I would feel a little hurt, a little taken advantage of. It's like I just gave my heart and soul last year to you guys, all 16 games, and I just need some time off. And then when you sit there and crush me a little bit saying you don't have the heart to play this game, it would. But as much as everything's going on, I hope all the best to Telvin Smith. I hope that everything's good and he comes back, because the loss that the Jaguars are going to take right in the middle of that linebacking core, right in the middle of their defense, man, it's going to be huge.
No, I agree. And I think, again, he's a high-character guy. He's not one of these guys that's been an attitude problem or not been with the program, or at least if he is, we haven't heard anything about it. So it's kind of surprising to see that. Yeah. That's why I kind of think it is something going on, either probably mental health-wise. It's kind of like an Everson Griffin kind of scenario where he's just not right, and at least he has the maturity to come out there and say, something's not going on with me. But let's look at it from the Jags' perspective, because when you look at it, this is a pretty dangerous spot to be in, because if you sit there and say, hey, don't worry about it, just take this year off, that's fine. The next time somebody else gets this in their mind, they're going to do it too. They're going to sit there and think it's okay. So do you let this slide, Drew? Do you have to cut him if that's the case for not showing up when the time comes? Do you try to wait towards till the season gets a little closer and try to convince him? Because I think the Jaguars are in a rough spot here.
It does give him in a very rough spot, and it. Unfortunately, with not knowing what's going on and him not talking to the organization, if really they can't do anything at this point besides releasing him. And to release him would be an extremely, extremely huge loss. I mean, talk about a young, talented linebacker. It's such a weird scenario, man. I mean, we really haven't seen this. We've seen guys retire and then come back from retirement, but this is not a retirement. And usually retirements are talked about. They're usually seen before it's happened. This is literally just going, I don't think I can play this year.
I need a year off, yeah.
Yeah. It's literally something else. To be honest, they're in a tough spot. Now, Sharif says he thinks Coughlin needs to go.
Look, I'm kind of with you here. I think Coughlin's kind of mismanaged things. He's sitting there criticizing guys for not showing up to the voluntary workouts. But I wonder if there's something behind there, because I do kind of understand where he's coming from. Like, hey, if we want to win a Super Bowl, you guys have to want this. We need guys in here that actually want to win, want to show up, want to work. And they had two guys not show up, and, he probably could have handled that a little bit better than running to the media and sitting there criticizing him. But I kind of understand where he's coming from. If you want to win a Super Bowl, especially in a place like Jacksonville, you need to have the heart and the kind of drive that's going to get you there. You don't have the talent on this roster yet to sit there. You're not New England. You're not the Kansas City Chiefs. You're not the Saints, where you're just going to be a good team. You have to want it. You have to fight for it. And if you don't see fight out of these guys, I mean, maybe that's what you have to do. Maybe you have to call them out.
Man.
Again, tough things going on at Jacksonville, because I do understand both sides. Because like you said, if it's me and I'm giving everything and they're like, oh, he doesn't want it, yeah, I'm going to be upset.
Yeah. It's real tough, to be honest with you. It's real tough. As an organization of the Jaguars, I think they need to be reaching out to him consistently after preseason, after week 1, after week 2, literally after every game. Hey, Telvin, you missing it yet? Hey, Telvin, we need you back in the locker room.
Even more than that, I'd be like, how are you? What's going on? Tell us about it. Because, again, they don't even know what's going on.
I mean, that is part of the conversation. What I'm saying is they need Telvin more than Telvin needs the Jaguars. And I'm not saying that Telvin doesn't want the paycheck and the money, because there's no doubt about it. He does. The thing is, if they release him or cut him, guess what?
Are you sure about that? I don't know. I think, again, this might be one of those precedents where a lot of teams in the league sit there and say, if I sign this guy, and I sit there and say, it's okay.
Ricky Williams came back.
But that was weed, okay? You're sitting there saying, okay, it's weed. Some people sit there and say he was addicted to it and all this other stuff. That I understand.
Kareem Hunt found another job.
But you can't sit there and tell me it wasn't want. When it's want, when it's drive. I mean, what was the biggest thing about Josh Rosen falling in the draft? He doesn't want to play football. That, to me, is the biggest thing, because they'll overlook a lot of issues as long as you play hard and you want to be on the field.
So
if they call that into question, I just wonder how many teams are going to be lining up for him, regardless of how talented you are.
Oh, I think tons of teams will.
Because I think that can turn a lot. I think it can turn a locker room, Drew. I think again, if you have guys that aren't
20 teams that probably give him a call.
I don't know. I
really
don't think so.
What's going on? Was it a mental issue? Is everything okay? Can we talk about this? What's your want to play football again? If the Jaguars release him or try to play tough ball, they're making the mistake.
I guess. I don't know, Drew. Maybe I'm on the fence here a little bit, because again, this is a very tough spot for them to be in. If you sit there and say, hey, don't worry about it, it's okay, there's going to be 51 other guys sitting there saying, okay, well, if I feel the same way,
I get that
I could just call up Jacksonville and say, yeah, I'm taking the year off.
But always calling him, always checking on him, always seeing if he's ready to come back is the right move for that organization. Nathan, I'm glad you could join us, man. He says Cam will be signed soon.
I don't think so. I think the injury's probably it. I think he's holding out hope, kind of like Ryan Shazier, that, hey, maybe I can get right. If I can keep rehabbing, I can get back on the football field. I don't think there's going to be a team that's willing to roll the dice and put him on their PUP list or anything like that, pay him any kind of money until they see that he's, got some potential to get back on the field. I think more than likely we're going to see him retire here in a year or two.
Eric Berry will get signed before Cam does.
I think so too, absolutely. But we can move on here, Drew. Let's talk about Xavien Howard next for the Dolphins, because this 5-year, $76.5 million, 46 of that guaranteed, now the highest paid cornerback. Is he worth that kind of money?
Yes, he absolutely is. He is one of the highlights of that defense. He is a consistent ball hawk, one of the best ball hawking corners in the league. I think it's 11 interceptions in the last 17 games.
And 7 in the last 12 for last season, tying the NFL league.
There is an issue with injuries.
For the year.
There is an issue with him being injured. But what do you got going on in Miami right now?
Well, you got a lot of cap space, too, on top of it. You're right. You don't have a lot of talent.
You don't have a lot of talent.
You're not paying a lot of money to guys.
You got a young, striving defense. And when you have that money, sign the good players.
And they did something smart here. No, normally I don't say that about the Dolphins organization, but they front-loaded this contract going into next offseason. They're expected to have somewhere around $100 million worth of cap space, so they front-loaded it. They said, we're going to pay you a lot of this contract towards the front end of this deal, and then the back end, when we are actually good, when we've done some building, you're going to be a little bit cheaper. That is a bit of a double-edged sword, because usually when guys get those front-loaded contracts, they come out and say, well, I made it through years 1, 2, and 3, now I want a new deal. I'm 28 years old. I'm still pretty good. I want a new deal because I want to make more money. And the team is almost, stuck paying them at that point because they're paid so far under market value. So again, this can come back to bite the Dolphins, especially if this guy wants to be consistently high paid. But if they get him to play on this contract all the way through, we're talking about a very talented cornerback winding up on this team for pretty cheap when the Dolphins are probably looking to win this division again.
Yeah, Nathan is agreeing that they needed to sign him. And let's not forget, this team did a lot of wheeling and dealing during the offseason, getting rid of a lot of players, moving around in the draft a little bit. I cannot remember the exact number, but it looks like their picks for next year's draft.
They have 10 picks. And it'll probably be 12 when you factor in all the compensatory stuff.
I've actually heard closer up to 15 picks.
I'd be shocked if it's that high. So right now I've heard 12, but that's with the compensatories factored in and everything. If they lose the guys they're expected to lose, because there's a weird, complex NFL formula to decide where you get those picks and how many of them you get. But still, when you're talking about rebuilding, what do we talk about the Colts? What do we talk about some of these other teams? You get a lot of these picks, and you just let them fall out. I think the Dolphins are doing a good job of that. For the first time in a long time, I like what the Miami Dolphins are doing.
Yeah. It's definitely going to bring them a lot of young, good talent. And like I said, signing your best player on your defense to a long-term contract is the right move.
Absolutely.
The right move.
All right, Drew. Let's move forward and talk some NBA if you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Game 1 going on tonight. Well, I should say Game 6, but the first one we're talking about, the Warriors and the Rockets. No Kevin Durant. Are you concerned if you're a Warriors fan?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm dancing in the street if I'm a Rockets fan, but
absolutely. As it's been said that he's going to be done for this series. They're not going to have him for if it goes to a Game 7. It will not go. He will not be for that game either. It's huge. I mean, the guy's been on fire. He's been the most consistent thing that the Warriors have. Luckily for them, they got plenty of firepower behind them. But losing your consistency, losing the guy that's always doing the right thing and playing well, and then losing that's tough for any team.
Absolutely. And also on top of it, when you look at the Rockets, I think this is just kind of a missed opportunity. When he went out in Game 5, if you could have found a way to come back and win that game, and you're talking about having a 2-game advantage, no Kevin Durant for the rest of the series, this would be in the Rockets' bag right now. I think they win Game 6, especially because I believe it's in Houston.
It's in Houston.
And then Game 7, they have to go back to Golden State. I think they probably lose this series in 7 games because of that pivotal Game 5. I mean, I think it's like 80% of the time the team that wins Game 5 wins the series as well. I think we're going to see that. Let's not forget, Golden State still has Steph Curry. They still have Klay Thompson. Still have Draymond Green, who are all going to be out there. Very talented guys. I think they're too hard of a team to expect to beat twice, one at home and once on the road.
But have been inconsistent in these playoffs.
But they're going to get more shots now.
But now
they're both rhythm shooters. Guess how you get rhythm, Drew? You start shooting more.
I completely agree with you. I understand it. But when you have that consistency, it's an issue. You're going to lose it. You lose Durant. It's an issue. If Houston is going to win a series against the Warriors, this is right now.
Or maybe next year if they lose everybody. That'll be nice. But at least for this year, I totally agree with you. Kevin Durant is out. But they've been in this kind of scenario before where they've had stars not playing well, everything else. Houston has not managed to find that kryptonite to beat the Golden State Warriors. I'm still going to take the Warriors in 7. I think it goes to 7. I think Houston's going to win this one in probably pretty easily out there in Houston. I think they're going to score. They're going to come out amped up, and then Game 7's going to roll around. The Warriors are going to have their back to the wall, and magically enough, they're going to come out. Either Clay or Curry are going to come out. They're going to catch fire, and they're going to go drop like 12 threes within 8 minutes or something like that.
Sharif agrees with you. He says it's going to 7, and Golden State will win the series. Guys, I am actually going to flip what I've been saying, that Golden State's going to win it. I think losing Kevin Durant is huge. I think Houston wins it in Game 7. He's going to do it in front of their home court, their fans, just to put icing on the cake.
Wow. Well, let's talk about another series you care about here, Drew, the Nuggets and the Trailblazers, because honestly, this game, we've been talking about it, they were a 6-point differential for the entire season series. This has been the closest probably playoff series of the entire NBA playoffs to this point. So, do you see the Nuggets pulling out a win here in Game 7?
I absolutely do. Like I've been saying, they have the best home field or home court record all this season. They've been playing absolutely lights out in front of their fans at Pepsi Center. Don't get me wrong, I really kind of wish that they would have won Game 6. I wish they would have had a little bit more time to rest, watch the Warriors and Rockets series, kind of get used to those teams. I know they've been paying attention to them, but it's different when you have other teams on your mind. Let's be all completely honest. The Portland Trailblazers, they've had a lot of injuries with their big man. Cantor, I believe, is dealing with a dislocated shoulder. It's having a little bit of issue trying to guard the Nuggets' best player, Jokic, and he's been playing lights out. He's been playing lights out all year long, and I know everyone's going to kind of make fun of me or say something that I don't know what I'm talking about. When you talk about the MVP of this season, if you don't put Jokic in that conversation, not saying he gets a vote, not saying he's going to win it, but if he's not in that conversation, you're not an NBA fan. Well, after that...
And my biggest point here, to at least to back you up on this, is what would the Nuggets look like without him?
No,
when you talk about the most valuable player to his team, he might be the most valuable guy to any one team in the NBA. Yeah. Maybe you could sit there and say Giannis is more important to the Bucks, but they have guys like Chris Middleton and others who can step up in the clutch. I mean, I don't really see that next big
Murray's
guy.
Way too inconsistent.
And I like Murray, but I'm saying I don't think this isn't a playoff team with just Murray.
Yeah.
So, I absolutely agree with you. I think Jokic has been absolutely fantastic. I'm going to pick the Trailblazers, though, just to spite you. No, I'm kidding.
That's fine.
Not just to spite you. I mean, I think they're a great team as well. I think, again, we looked at how tight almost every one of these games has been. There's been like one blowout, and it was just Game 5. Every one of these games has been very tight. I think the Trailblazers are going to have just enough to edge out the Nuggets in a Game 7, even though they're on the road.
Denver, huh?
I think Damian Lillard's going to hit some kind of clutch shot, and we're going to move on.
So inconsistent in this
But they've
series.
had guys like McCollum. They've had Cantor step up when they've needed to. They have a very deep team as well, and probably even deeper than the Nuggets.
Well, I'll tell you right now, don't expect Hood to get 25 points off the bench in Denver. It's not going to happen. He scored his career high at 25 points. It's not going to happen again.
They're getting hot when they need to get hot, Drew. That's important.
If you let him go
especially
back to what he was
playoffs.
averaging, I think it was like 8 or 9 points a game, they did not win that series. Hood did get hot. He did help them out win. And, Dillard and McCollum are great players. There's no doubt about it. But you're not winning in Denver.
Let's move back east. Let's talk about the 76ers and the Raptors. Because of this series, I thought it was done. I thought it was done and dusted. I thought the Raptors were going to just go home and I should say go on the road and crush the 76ers, just absolutely manhandle them after that Game 5 performance. I thought it was over. Yeah. I really did. I was kind of shocked to see the 76ers. They had some fight in them. I mean, props to them. This has been one of the more inconsistent playoff teams where when they're playing really well, they look hard to beat. And then when they're playing bad, they look average at best.
Yeah.
So what kind of 76ers are we getting in Game 7, Drew? Are they going to come out with that same kind of fire that they've been missing for some of the series?
I wouldn't.
It's hard to say.
I wouldn't think so, man. I mean, just because you nailed it right on the head. When they are off, man, they are off. It looks completely like that team. Honestly, that team doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs when they're off. That's how bad they look.
Now, Sharif says Drew's giving me the look. Yeah, he loves his Nuggets, man. He loves everything Denver. Also, Nathan says he wants the Rockets.
Not everything Denver. I don't like the Broncos.
He loves the Broncos. Nathan says he wants the Rockets and 76ers to win it all. As long as it's someone not named Golden State, I'm okay with it. But I don't know, man. I really don't love the Rockets per se. I don't like James Harden. Just the way he plays the game isn't fantastic for me. He goes out looking for fouls. I don't really respect that so much. And I know everybody does it. We're in the league now where everybody flops. I just want to see some toughness out of these guys. When you watch James Harden shoot, I mean, it seems like half the time he's trying to shoot to get to the free throw line. I don't like that, so I hope they lose too. So if they could both just knock each other out, and this could be the Western Conference Finals between Trailblazers and the Nuggets. I'd be okay with that. But again, as long as it's not Golden State, I'm not going to complain too much. If it's Golden State, I'm going to be like, why do we even watch the NBA? Just put some money on Golden State every year to win everything and be done with it.
Scott's saying the Raptors took a break, and that's the reason the Sixers
I don't think it
won
was
that game.
just because they took a break. I think the 76ers came out hot. I think they were like, okay, backs against the wall, time to start playing. The problem is this team has not sustained any kind of intensity. And when you don't sustain intensity, especially in the playoffs, you can't last. You're going to have these games where you're just off and things don't go right for you. I think the 76ers are going to be probably there in a Game 7.
Ben Simmons is not going to...
I like Ben Simmons. I think he's a good player. I know he doesn't shoot, but he can make things happen. He can drive in
He
pretty
got
well.
hot. You talk about a player that got hot that has not been hot. That was one of them. And let's just not forget, Kawhi's clutch. And that guy is a stud when he wants to be.
He's better than Kobe if you listen to some other people.
I don't know about all that. But
Me either.
You put it on his back. You sit there and say, hey, man, you need to win this game. That's a guy that I would trust to win a game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think this is almost a must-win series for both of these guys, because if you're the 76ers, there's talk of breaking everything up, and you either move Simmons or Embiid, or you move guys, you don't keep guys like Jimmy Butler or Tobias Harris if the series doesn't get you at least to the Western Conference Finals. And then there's the Raptors. If you don't get to the Eastern Conference Finals, I should say, if you don't get there, do you keep Kawhi, a guy who didn't want to be in Toronto to begin with, especially when the Clippers are calling his name right now? Drew, I mean. This Clippers, they gave the Warriors a little bit of a run for their money early in the series. There was no legitimate chance of beating them, but if you add a guy like a Kawhi to the mix, we're going to be talking about a pretty good team out there in L.A., and it's not going to be the Lakers.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. Kawhi would make the Clippers a better team, but does team chemistry disappear when you add a superstar into this? Because you got to remember, there was no all-star on that roster.
Tobias Harris is supposed to be the guy who carries everything, and they traded him. Yeah, and then they're like, you're giving up on us. And maybe there's a bit of that underdog mentality. That's what carried them into the playoffs. It's what got them a game or two against Golden State. But I don't know, Drew. I think the Raptors are going to have a hard time keeping Kawhi Leonard around if they don't at least make the Eastern Conference Finals. Because their selling pitch right now needs to be, hey, man, it just wasn't our year. You stick around, next year will be our year. If you don't get that, he's going to walk. And I don't blame him. I would too. If you don't get to the Eastern Conference Finals in the weaker conference in the NBA, this team's probably not going places. There's probably about 4 or 5 legitimate title contenders. If you can't at least get me to the conference finals, we're not one of them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, but have you looked at that crowd? Have you looked at how those Toronto fans come out for their team? I mean, it's impressive. It's impressive what Toronto and their fans are doing. I mean, it's a crazy place to play at now. It used to be pretty dead for a long time. The thing up there was Vince Carter, and that was the reason to go up there and watch him. And then now they're actually a legitimate playoff.
You know what else they got up there? Lots and lots of taxes on people making over $100,000. And guess what every NBA player is doing? Making over $100,000. So, look, if I was his agent, if I was his financial advisor, I would sit there and say, Kawhi, we don't need to put up with these taxes. Go to San Antonio. Go back to San Antonio. Go anywhere else besides Canada, because if you get out of Canada, you're going to be paying considerably less on taxes every year. I know California is high, but it's not as high as Canada is. I know he wants to go back home, and Scott's kind of saying he's going to Sacramento because he wants to go home to Cali. That won't happen. I know the Sacramento Kings are better than they were. I really don't see him going to Sacramento. Also, Damien says the Clippers need Blake Griffin back. I don't know, man. Is Blake Griffin the answer?
I think the Clippers got better getting rid of him.
I can't disagree with you. They made the playoffs. They had some fight with him. I mean, they took a game or two from Golden State. You can't sit there and say Blake Griffin would have done that if he was still the leader of the team. So I think the Blake Griffin era is over in L.A., and that's okay. Unless the Lakers want to go and make a move for him. But that's okay. I think the Clippers need to go find anyone they can for a superstar to lead a plucky group of guys who are just going to go in and work hard every day. Maybe then they get a little bit deeper, but it's the NBA, man. How do you beat teams like Houston and Golden State if you don't have 2, 3, 4 superstars on a team?
It's rough to do it. Sharif thinks Kawhi is going to be a Clipper, and Jimmy...
That's where I'd put my money, too.
And Jimmy just found out he's going to the Bucks game 1 on Wednesday. Let your dad know that I would also like to go.
I was going to say, you have 2 tickets, right?
But he has to...
Who do you like better, me or Drew?
or just all 3 tickets. I'll buy you beers.
Absolutely.
Pick me! No, he's got my plane tickets and a place for us to stay. I can sleep on couches and floors, by the way. I'm very good at it.
Absolutely. But moving forward here, Drew, who are you taking? 76ers or Raptors? Before we stop talking about them.
Raptors.
I am too. I think this is Raptors as well. Let's talk about the Bucks. I almost said Buccaneers. I always do that. Let's talk about the Milwaukee
I
Bucks.
always want to talk about the Buccaneers.
I do. Let's talk about them sitting and waiting on whoever gets out of this series. Is that how big of an advantage is that? You're going to get home court as well because you're the 1 seed.
That's the Islanders. I mean, it's nice to get healthy. It's nice to it's nice to sit there and kind of lick your wounds and sit there and go, okay, it's time to get healthy and let's revamp our team and stuff like that. But if they're not practicing hard, if they're not training for this and getting ready for this and training, but practicing and getting ready and watching film, they're going to take a step back.
Scott says Blake is almost over, talking about Blake Griffin. Big guys just don't last in the NBA, especially when your thing is I drive in and score. Also, Charlie, good to see you, man. It has been a minute. Good to see you back. Also, Jimmy says, you boys could see Green Bay then, too. Drew, sounds like we got a plan coming together. Sharif
I don't want to drive, man.
Sharif, I will drive. Sharif says the Bucks will win the next series and the title. That's pretty optimistic. I like the Bucks. I really do. But when you're talking about the Rockets, when you're talking about the Warriors, man, I still got to call them the favorites. I still think, not just because of the veterans and the teams that have been there, the teams that have been at the top of the NBA for as long as they have, but because they got the shooters. And usually that's who I bet on. Usually I bet on the teams that shoot. I know shooting can come and go a little bit. You can get cold, but usually it's the guy that goes there and can pull up the jump shot, can pull up a bunch of threes, that winds up winning in the NBA these days. It's gone are the days where you drive in, and I think that's what the Bucks do best, is they drive in with Giannis and let him score and kick it out to some other guys and let them shoot. But if I had to pick one of these teams, it's whoever wins Warriors Rockets to win right now. But the Bucks getting this rest, because I asked you about it.
Jimmy's over here making me jealous. It's really hard. I can't focus. Now he's going to the Packers and Chiefs game. Come on, man.
You can have that. I'll go to the NBA one with him. How about that?
No. I'm Jimmy's best friend.
I don't think so. Going about the Buccaneers. See, I did it. Going back to the Milwaukee and the Bucks. When you talk about them and you talk about this extra rest, when you talk about rest versus rust, I think in the NBA, rest is fine. I'm not really worried about too much rust, especially when you're not shooting. If you're a team of shooters, if all you do is shoot, then yeah, you can have a little bit of kind of conversation as to whether it's better or not, whether they finish that series early or not. But when you're going to go try to score on the inside anyway, that's okay. You're allowed to do. You can take as much time off. I think that helps. You're going to get some rest. You're going to get healthy, and you're going to come back stronger in the early part of the next series. If you're going to beat the Raptors, if you're going to beat the 76ers, this rest only helps. Especially a team like the Bucks. It only helps right now.
Yeah, I would like to think so. I mean, they really haven't shown a sign of weakness. I know they gave one to Boston, and they looked pretty weak, but I just think it was just kind of Boston was a little bit more prepared. After that, they dominated the next 4 games.
Absolutely. I think Boston kind of took them by surprise in Game 1, or you could sit there and say it's not their night. There are those kind of games where you just... The shot doesn't fall, right? Sometimes it's the size of a dime. Sometimes it's the size of the ocean when you're talking about the rim. I think that just wasn't the Bucks' night. I think that could have absolutely easily been a 4-game sweep as well. So I like the Bucks. I probably like them to get out of the East as well, whether it's the Raptors or the 76ers that get through. I just don't see them beating one of these teams out of the West unless the Nuggets or the Trailblazers can pull an upset next round.
Right. Damien is asking, do you all see Jimmy Butler going back to Chicago?
No, he's too temperamental. He's too emotional of a player, I think. He's too...
He wanted out of there.
Whatever you want to call it, I just don't see him going back to a place like Chicago.
Or a place he didn't want to be in the first place.
It's just like burned bridges at this point. He's not going back to Chicago. I really don't think so. Chicago's going to have to figure something else out. I hope for their sake they get the number 1 overall pick and then go take Zion and start building around him. But Drew, I don't know. I really don't see them actually adding a guy in this offseason. Why would you go there when there's so many other lucrative places out there? I know they had the Michael Jordan stint, but those days are gone in Chicago.
Yeah, long gone. Unfortunately.
Exactly. I agree, man. I totally agree. Let's talk about the NHL, though. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Blues and the Sharks. A series that, again, I didn't think the Sharks were getting out of the first round. I thought Vegas would take it in 7 because I thought age would have been a factor. And then I thought the Avalanche were going to take it in 7 because that was going to be a factor. I just don't know how to call these Game 7 games, Drew. Game 7's not my forte, apparently. I don't come through in the clutch.
That's why I'm going to win all these ones we talked about. Both teams are very surprising. That's absolutely the best way to put it. Out of the two, even with the Blues' history of not winning, I think the Sharks are the more surprised team being at this spot that the Blues are, because I fully believe in Jordan Binnington, the goalie that the Blues have, and when you look at the Sharks, you look at that roster, they have so outperformed their rosters and the people they had. They've been playing so well together, and like you nailed it earlier, a lot of emotional games and full series. But it's going to be a great series.
That
All
takes
said
a toll.
and done, it's going to be a great series.
I agree with you. I think the Blues are still the hot team. I know they kind of struggled a little bit with Dallas, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't think that was a good matchup for them. I think Dallas matched up pretty well against a team like the Blues. I don't know about the Sharks. I look at this. Yes, they're physical. Yes, they can score the puck as well. But they've got a lot of old players in this team, Drew. A lot of guys that have been around the block, and this is 2 emotional Game 7s. When you look at this, man, I don't think they have the goaltending to keep up with a team like the Blues, who, like you said, Binnington's been playing pretty well. I know he's had a couple down games in this series, in this playoffs as well, but he's been pretty solid all the way through. So I got to give him credit, man. I think the Blues are going to win this series. I think the Sharks are going to kind of run out of steam. That kind of age, compounded with the emotion, compounded with the 2 Game 7 series, they're going to run out, Drew, especially when you talk about both of those series having some controversy with them.
This is a Twilight Zone, because I remember you saying this about a week ago.
I know. I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. You know what? I'm picking them to lose in 7.
Just real quick, going back, Damien wants to know, do we see Kawhi going to Chicago?
If they get if somehow they get like a number 1 pick, or they trade that high pick and bring in another star, maybe he'll think about it. But I think Kawhi wants to win, and I don't know that Chicago's close to winning right now. I don't think Zach Levine is really the guy you build your franchise around.
And then Charlie says Knight should have won that series, and he's not just saying that because he lives in that area. They choke on the power play. So do the Predators, man.
I mean,
so do the Predators.
There have been 2 teams now that have been like, we've been cheated. And this is one of those, I mean, the Avalanche, when they had that goal disallowed because the guy didn't get his skates off the ice for the Avalanche, and then the Vegas in round 1 also feeling like they got cheated in that Game 7. I mean, Marchand's like, we got cheated out of this. The coach was like, we're not going to ask the NHL to do anything. We just got hosed in this. But the Sharks have kind of survived. They've outlived their maybe potential, I think, a little bit here. I think the Blues are going to be able to come in here. They're the hotter team going into the playoffs, the team that's been motivated since January. They're younger. They're faster. I think they're probably better in just pound for pound on any given night. I think the Blues are going to win this series. I think it's still going to be a good one, but I think the Blues have every box you want to check towards them, except maybe experience.
I also had the Blues winning this series. I don't want to keep on harping it, but just Binnington just surprised me how well that young guy can play goalie. He's a stud.
And that's a lot of times that's enough in the NHL. If your goalie finds fire and says, I'm not letting anything in the net, it's really hard to beat a team when you can't score on them.
Yep.
Let's talk Hurricanes and Bruins lastly, Drew, here. Because this one, if you didn't see my error before, the Hurricanes were up 3-0, not down 3-0. Thanks, wherever I read that. And now, having come off a sweep, obviously they're down 1-0 to the Bruins already. I know they're kind of the inferior team on paper and everything. Do you think that rest kind of maybe turned to a little bit of rust here in that, and they lost round 1, and they're going to be able to get a little more competitive here?
I would think so. I would believe that, the first game of the series, as important it is a win, to lose the first game of the series is also kind of like a reality check as well for the losers. It's this is your Cinderella team, in my opinion. This is your Hurricanes. This is the team that you sit there and go, there's no way that right now they could be one of the last 4 teams.
Well, now that the Blue Jackets are out of it, I absolutely agree.
I get the Blue Jackets. I understand what I'm saying, but Hurricanes, in my opinion, are more of a Cinderella. But talk about a team to face that's going to be real tough is the Bruins. And a friend of mine said that the Bruins are doing some incredible things on the ice before the series, all the playoff series ever started. He goes, I see them going really far and winning it. I'm gonna go on that bandwagon and say the Bruins are going to win this series. I am too,
but for another reason. Because the NHL loves its old blood teams. And guess what the only old blood team left in this is here, Drew? The Boston Bruins. So, yeah, I absolutely do see them winning this as well. I think they're going to get some calls. We're going to see a lot of things kind of go their way a little bit. I don't want to, put my tinfoil hat on just yet and say it's all a conspiracy and it's already them. The NHL is trying to force feed it to them. But if you look at it, usually the old blood teams get the calls. And I think the Boston Bruins, you give a team that good those kind of calls, they're going to go far. And I absolutely think they're the favorite right now, for me at least, to win the series, or to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, they're definitely, in my opinion, going to beat the Hurricanes. Depending on what comes out of that series, if it's the Sharks that win, I think the Bruins can win. If it's the Blues and the Bruins, it's going to be really, really great Stanley Cup finals.
I think even the Sharks. I mean, you talk about some of the names in there, guys like Joe Thornton, Pavelski, all these other guys that have been in the NHL and have not had a chance to win the Stanley Cup, forever.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a good series as well. Yeah. I think the Bruins are the team that are probably pretty obviously
I'm not knocking. I mean, to be honest with
I
you,
like what the Hurricanes have done.
Yeah. I'm not knocking any of these 4 teams. I don't mean sit there and say, oh, it won't be a good series. I just, when I look at them and what the NHL wants, to be honest, in my opinion, it's the Blues and the Bruins.
Absolutely. All right, Drew. We got some special thanks here. Obviously, it's been a fun show, man. We talked pretty much everything across the board. We didn't get to baseball, but hey, we've got 125 more games to go. So
Albert Pujols hit his 2,000 RBI with a home run.
We talk baseball.
There you go.
Hey,
good for him.
Great guy. Glad to see him on there. Too bad his contract ruined the Angels. Moving forward, we've got some special thanks here.
It's 100% true. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for all the comments, likes, and shares. We absolutely appreciate it. We appreciate it immensely. You guys are great. You're the reason why we talk sports. Chris, I'm glad that you jumped in real quick.
He has the Blues winning it all in the NHL. I think the Bruins are going to be a very tough team to stack up against if they make it through in the East, because like I said, those teams tend to get the calls. Toronto tends to lean towards them on whether a goal counts or whether a penalty is actually a penalty. But if it's the Hurricanes, I think either one of those teams in the West would have to be my favorite at this point. I think the Hurricanes are probably the 4th seed if there was one left in this NHL
I'd
playoff.
love to see the Blues win. Absolutely love it. But I have to watch these series. I have to see how these series
roll. They need one.
Roll.
It's been, 30-some years they've been in the league.
I have to watch how these series roll before I can sit there and say who's going to win out of the two. I really want to see how each of these
You're
teams
all in
play
that series momentum.
I got to know first. But, guys, thank you so much for all your comments, likes, shares. Again, thank you so much. We appreciate all the love. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I hope you guys have a great weekend. But real quick, the special thanks to Sharif, Andy, Steven, Nathan, Scott, Damon, Charlie, and Chris. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much.
Show's much better with you guys. We appreciate all the comments all the time. Again, we talk sports because we get to talk it with you.
Yep.
So for Sports Around the Bar, I am Jake, your bartender. This is Drew. We'll be back on Monday.
We will.
I don't know what we're talking about, but we'll be back.
Go ahead.
I almost stole your line.
We'll see you then.